I have some Google alerts set up so that I can get notified if there's an interesting new study that comes out, if I or my work is mentioned on the web, or if someone gives really dumb advice about pornography use. This is written by Zachary Zane, who's the author of Boy Slut, a memoir and manifesto. He writes the Sexplain It column for Men's Health. Based on his recent article, responding to a reader, I probably won't be reading much more from Zachary Zane. This piece is titled, "My Kink is Ruining My Dating Life." And here's the letter that Mr. Zane responds to in that article. Dear Sexplain It. So I don't really believe in porn addiction, but is it possible to be addicted to nasty, kinky shit? Let me back up. I spent the pandemic alone and was helping take care of people, so I was celibate. And that meant I jerked off a lot. But I started watching or reading wild shit, and I'm not saying I would do them all, only some of the extreme stuff. Now that I've started dating again, I've enjoyed jerking off to this nasty wild shit online way more than the dates. It's just so much hotter. I mean, it could just be the people, but is it possible to just have your brain warped by kinky fetishes to the point where they get you off, even if you're too embarrassed to mention what they are in this letter? Nasty and Satisfied Alone. It is signed. Now, I wish this man had sent me this question rather than sending one to Zachary Zane, but that's who we sent it to. And let's see what Zane had to say to this. Dear Nasty and Satisfied Alone, I don't think the issue here is whether or not you have an addiction, although you don't, for the record. More on that in a sec. I think your real problem is the shame you feel about enjoying kinks that society has told you are deviant. Back to your addiction question. As most sex researchers and educators will tell you, porn is not an addictive substance like alcohol. No, not even the nasty, kinky shit you're into. I reached out to I don't know how to pronounce this name. Gigi Angle, ACS, certified sex educator at 3Fun and author of All the Fucking Mistakes, who explained that there are three major components of addiction that have never been scientifically observed with sex, porn, or masturbation. Number one, tolerance. In other words, people don't need more and more sex in order to reach orgasm. Withdrawal. You don't experience painful withdrawal symptoms if you stop having sex or watching porn. And risk of death. People don't die of orgasm overdoses. Okay, let me address these three one by one. So first, tolerance is absolutely present with compulsive sexual activity. It's clear as day in the letter that's featured here. This man has altered his sexual preferences and tastes over time, jerking off to nasty, kinky shit, as he writes. It didn't happen right away. It happened over time because as he exposed himself to this sexual content again and again over months and years, his tolerance for that sexual content grew, and he escalated in the type of content he was seeking out. I see the same thing happen all the time in my clients, and I see it very clearly in my own past use of pornography. This man, he's not enjoying dating or sex anymore because his tolerance to sexual stimuli has risen above the type of stimulation that most partners are going to be able to provide, or a real sexual situation without having complete voyeuristic control and specific fetishes or kinks is going to be able to provide. Just as a drug user will need higher and higher doses or different, harder, more stimulating substances over time, so does the compulsive porn user, the chronic porn user, need more specific or extreme doses of porn to get aroused. And yes, for some, this can mean a more difficult time reaching orgasm, as it was for me. Second, I talk every day to men who are going through withdrawal symptoms from their porn use and their sexual behavior. They might have mood swings, insomnia, headaches, irritability, depression, flatline, as we call it, or intense cravings. And these usually pass within 2 or 3 months of being completely porn-free and compulsive sex-free. And they're generally not as intense as withdrawals from substances like alcohol or opiates, but they do tend to actually last longer than those other types of withdrawals. And third, the risk of death is not part of any definition of addiction I've ever come across, so I'm not sure where your source is getting that. At its core, addiction is about losing control over a behavior that is causing you harm, that you have realized is causing you more harm than good, and that you've tried to reduce or stop that behavior and found yourself unable to keep those commitments to yourself or to your loved ones. It's that loss of control that's really at the core of addiction, not the risk of death. And it is absolutely possible to become addicted to using porn or other harmful behaviors. Plus, even if this was part of the definition of addiction, I've talked with plenty of people who were addicted to the point where they were using porn even while driving, and that is definitely risking death. Or men who had become suicidal because of the harmful consequences of their porn use or other sexual behavior, also a risk of death. So Zane continues, so if it's not an addiction, what's happening? You've opened up a bit of a Pandora's box with novelty seeking. In other words, you've discovered a new sexual fantasy that you enjoy, and you're currently focused on getting off to these fantasies. That's really all that's going on, and there's nothing wrong with it as long as you're enjoying yourself. Well, this man that wrote to Zane is clearly in distress and not enjoying himself, and he's recognizing the consequences of his porn use. And Zachary's answer is just keep digging yourself deeper. Just keep following the same path, the same actions that got you to this point where you're distressed and not able to connect properly with your dates. So this stems from the common misinformed belief that pornography use cannot alter sexual tastes. It can only educate you about things that turn you on that you didn't realize before. And certainly that is possible, to encounter something in your viewing of pornography, especially if you have limited sexual experience, that you realize turns you on. You might realize, oh, I really like tall partners or dominant partners or submissive partners, or I really like this type of sex act or this type of dirty talk or whatever. But what Zachary Zane does not realize is that for chronic porn users who are in that trap of tolerance and escalation, you can actually start acquiring new sexual tastes and preferences that you never would have been interested in had you not become a chronic porn user. And it's not that you're just discovering new things about yourself, you're actually altering your sexual template and your sexual preferences over time. And this can cause people a lot of distress because their identity seems to be changing, their sexual preferences seem to be changing, and not only are they adding new sexual preferences, but they're losing their ability to become aroused and stimulated by what they used to be able to become aroused by. You know, simply being touched by and touching a partner that you're attracted to might no longer be enough, and now you have to incorporate these new kinks that you've discovered in pornography. In this case of the person who wrote in to Zachary Zane, who's been using for years and slowly escalating through more and more extreme genres, that is most likely, like all the clients that I see on a regular basis, someone who has escalated because of their porn use and not simply discovered their true sexual nature. And it's likely that if this person were to quit using porn, quit masturbating to those escalated fantasies, and give himself time, that he would start to lose interest in those new, more extreme sexual preferences and regain sensitivity to the things that used to turn him on, more vanilla partners and more vanilla sexual interaction. And hedonism, contrary to what Zachary Zane seems to believe, is not the key to success or happiness. Hedonism is the pursuit of pleasure for pleasure's sake alone. And pleasure does not equal fulfillment. People can be following their desires and following their pleasure and end up with a life that they hate and disliking even themselves and filled with self-loathing and dissatisfaction, even though they had been just following pleasure the whole time. The men I work with who have recognized that following pleasure hasn't led them where they want to go and have chosen to stop masturbating to pornography are extremely grateful to regain their sexual sensitivity and their ability to enjoy more vanilla sexual interaction with real partners in real life. Zachary says, I like how sex and relationship psychotherapist Silva Neves, author of Compulsive Sexual Behaviors, a psychosexual treatment guide for clinicians, responded when I showed him your question. Quote, "You've stumbled across some sexual things that made some parts of your erotic mind go, yes," end quote. Now that this part of your mind is active, you're excited by them. It's like when people try out rock climbing for the first time, love it, and want to keep doing it. Or like when someone tries heroin for the first time and loves it and wants to keep doing it. So stop worrying about your brain being warped by porn, Zachary writes. If there's anything you need to fix in your brain, it's the shame and embarrassment you feel about your sexual desires. If sexual shame is clouding your thoughts when you're on a date, I'm not surprised you're not connecting with people. You're probably too busy worrying that if they learned about your sexual desires, they would think you're sick or perverted, which you're not. Now, I'm all for self-acceptance and destigmatizing sexual desires and sexuality. I think Zachary and I would actually be on the same page with that. But the only way that this man who wrote in to Zachary Zane, is going to really discover who he is and what he wants out of sexuality and relationships is if he frees himself from the influence of pornography for long enough to get back in touch with his own internal desires. He needs to give himself the chance to recover his sexual sensitivity and explore in real life and with real partners what turns him on and what arouses him without the influence of pornography. Zachary writes, unpacking a lifetime of sexual shame takes a lot of work, and therapy is a good place to start. You can also follow sex-positive and kink-positive accounts on Instagram, like blah blah blah. You might also benefit from spending time on Reddit, and there's very likely a subreddit on your kink. I have a good subreddit for you. It's called NoFap. And just seeing other folks who share your kink can help normalize your desires. Shameless plug, I also recommend you pick up a copy of Men's Health Best Sex Ever, 200 frank, funny, and friendly answers about getting it on, I think his own book, blah, blah, blah. So if you feel bad or disturbed about something you're doing, the answer isn't always that the feelings are the problem. Sometimes when you feel embarrassed or ashamed about something that you're doing, it's the thing that you're doing that's actually the problem. And those feelings of embarrassment or shame are indicating to you that those actions or those behaviors are in discord with your values and who you are. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to shame people for specific sexual desires or specific kinks. But if those kinks are something that you've only developed through years of pornography use, then maybe those feelings are telling you that this isn't who you are. This isn't what you really want. And you, in fact, need to give yourself the chance to get back to being your true self. I don't know what your kinks are, Zachary writes, but you could even try them in real life if you can do so ethically and consensually. Embracing your anxiety-inducing kinks is a great way to fight your own internalized stigma. As Neves says, the bottom line is that once you've tried new sexual flavors that you love, it is hard to ignore them, and in fact, it is not advisable to ignore them because repressing them can be damaging to mental health. Acting on them can also be damaging to mental health. Just ask all the men I've worked with who have acted on their porn-escalated sexual desires in real life with partners or sex workers, and then later deeply regretted it. I'm not saying you should never act on these desires that you've developed through porn, but at least give yourself a few months away from porn to get back to a more firm sense of self and who you are and what you want before making that decision on whether to explore these new kinks in real life or not. I can promise you that countless others share your kinky desires. After all, sounds like there's plenty of porn for whatever you're into. Consider planning dates with people who share your passion for nasty shit. You give some recommendations on how to find people who share his kink. And keep watching the porn you love, he says. You seem to have created this false dichotomy. Either you keep watching porn or you find someone good enough that you don't need to watch porn anymore. Good news, my friend, you can totally have both. Watching porn and dating are two separate activities. That's also why, if a date doesn't go well, it's probably because you didn't have chemistry, not because you're into kinky porn. Here's the hard truth to this letter writer and to Zachary and to anyone else who's watching this video. The hard truth is that everything you do changes who you are and affects every other part of your life. Compartmentalization is not something that is sustainable. It's in an addict's nature, to be sure, to compartmentalize your life, but it's not healthy and it's not sustainable, and it never works in the long term. You cannot jerk it to thousands of hours of nasty, kinky shit and have it have no effect on the rest of your life or your other relationships. My advice to the letter writer, if he happens to see this, is to just give yourself a chance to be porn-free for long enough that you can rediscover who you are without that influence in your life. Go without porn for 6 months and see if you're still into these escalated kinks that you have acquired through porn. Or even if you are still into them, my bet is that you'll be more sensitive again to more vanilla sexuality, and at least they can be a side dish and not something that's all-consuming and needs to be the centerpin for your future relationships. And if you can't stay away from porn for that long, then that is a strong indicator that this is a problem and that you might be actually addicted to pornography. That's all I have to say about that. Check out my link tree in the description below for more ways to get my help and more resources. And have a wonderful porn-free rest of 2022. See you in the next one.